Welcome to Dark Dreams.
The moon is full and it is dripping with blood.
Now comes Blood Moon Rising magazine.
Original fiction,
Creature features,
nightmarish artwork.
interviews, and other original horror.
Visit bloodmoonrisingmagazine.com and join our rising legion.
Horrified Press. horrifiedpress.wordpress.com.
Voices by Jack Dann. I was carefully papering the balsa wood wing struts of my scale model Gotha GV bomber when Crocker asked me if I ever spoke to dead people. Although Crocker is a member of the Susquehanna River Model Makers and Sex Fiends Association, which doesn't say much because all you have to do to become a member is hang out in the shack by the river and make models. Everyone thinks he's right off his nut. One of the guys nicknamed him Crock Shit because of all the stupid stories he told and the stupid questions he asked, and the name stuck. Hell, he seemed to like it, but nobody broke his arms or his legs or smashed up his models, and so he stayed on, sort of like a mascot. He was fat, freckled, and wore his white blonde hair in a brush cut, but he was also smart in his way. He was 12, a year younger than me, and was in 7th grade honors. "Steve, you hear me or what?" he asked me, turning down the volume on the club's battery-powered radio. It was playing the Big Bopper's Chantilly Lace. Since Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper had died in a plane crash back in February, the radio stations were still playing their stuff all the time. And here it was August. "You ever talked to a dead person or not?" "No, Bobby," I said. "I was trying to work the air bubbles out of the paper. This Gotha was the only model of its kind and would have a wingspan of over 6 feet. My stepfather had given me the kit for my birthday. I never talked to anybody who's dead except maybe you. Now turn the volume back up." But the song was over, and the disc jockey was saying something about Lou Costello being dead. I couldn't remember if he was the fat comedian or the skinny one, but I only liked the fat one, and I hoped it wasn't him. Anyway, this was frustrating work, and Crock Shit was, as usual, fouling everything up. I have to admit, though, that he made me curious. But just thinking about dead people made me feel jittery and sad, too. It made me think of my dad, my real dad, who died in the hospital when I was 7. Funny, the things you remember. I used to play a game with him when he came home from the office every night. We had a leather couch in the den. Dad called it the library, and I would slide my hand back and forth on the cushion while he would try to catch it. And when he did, he would hold it tight and we'd laugh. Dad had gray hair, and everybody said he was handsome. But when he was in the hospital, he didn't even know who Mom and I were. He thought Mom was his mother. She cried when he got mixed up, and I just felt weird about it, especially when he had an attack, and then talked in a language that sounded like op talk. Mom said it was because his brain wasn't working right. I knew that if I could only understand it, everything would be all right. It was like he was trying to tell me what to do in some secret language, and if I could only figure out the words, I'd be able to help him get well. But then he died, and I never got to say goodbye in a way he could understand, because his brain never did get right again. Crocker didn't say anything more for a while, which was unusual for him. When I had finished the wings, which weren't right and would have to be redone again, I looked up and said, "Crock Shit, what are you looking at?" Nothin'. What's with all this dead people stuff? I asked, trying to treat him like a human being. I just wanted to know if you'd ever done it, that's all. Done what? I just told you, talk to dead people. Have you? I asked, knowing for sure I would get one of his bullshit answers. Yeah, I do it a few times a week, when I don't come down here. Oh, sure. And where do you do that? Every day I check the paper to see if there's anything going on at the funeral home on the corner of Allen and Main. If there is, I just sort of walk in and talk to the corpse in the casket. If not, I come over here. And nobody says nothing to you. They just let you walk in and talk to the dead people. They ain't bothered me yet. After a pause, he said, You want to go with me today? They got somebody in there. And he showed me the obituary column from today's Sun Bulletin. I glanced at what he was trying to show me and shook out the sports section. Patterson was fighting Ingemar Johansson on Friday. I was rooting for Patterson, who had KO'd Archie Moore in '56. You want to go with me and see for yourself or not? Crocker asked, indignantly ripping the paper out of my hands. Or are you afraid? Screw you! You probably never been to a funeral in your life. I've been to funerals before, I said. Everybody has. But did you ever see a dead person? I had to say no to that. I never even saw my own father after he died. That certainly shut him up, but he had such a sorrowful look on his face that I felt sorry for him. I'm Jewish, I said, and Jews can't have open caskets. Of course, there must be a reason for that, but I don't know what it is. How'd he die? Crocker asked, fumbling around with his hands as if he wasn't used to having them. Something wrong with his liver. Like from drinking? He asked. No, it was nothing like that, I said. But I had heard my mother talking to the doctor. Maybe he did get sick from drinking, although I swear I can't remember ever seeing him drunk, or anything. And I had just about had it with Crocker's questions. He was acting like Jack Webb on Dragnet. You'd think he would have shut up after I told him about my father, but not Crocker. He was a nosy little bastard. After a pause, Crocker asked, Did you ever talk to him after he died? You're out of your freaking gourd, Crocker. Nobody but an a-hole thinks he can talk to people after they're dead. If you come with me today, I'll prove it to you. No way, sucker. I got better things to do than act like a nimble-narm. With your father being dead and all, I can't blame you for being afraid, Crocker said. I'd be too. Crocker, get the hell out of my life, I said. I guess I shouted at him because he looked real nervous, but I didn't need him spreading it all over the place that I was afraid to look at a dead person. Christ, Crocker's shit had a bigger mouth than my mother. Okay, I said, but if I don't hear this dead person talk like you say, I'm going to break your head. I said it as if I meant it. I guess I did. But that only seemed to make Crocker happy, for he nodded and helped me put away my Gotha bomber. The worst part of it was that I had to sneak into my house and put on a suit and tie, for Crocker said you can't just walk in with jeans and a t-shirt. But a deal was a deal. I met him back at the clubhouse, and we walked to the funeral home. It had been a hot, humid summer, and boring as hell. There was never anything to do, and even going down to the club and smoking and working on models was boring. And to make matters worse, I thought about Marie Dixon all the time. She was so beautiful. I would see her around once in a while, but I never said anything to her. I was waiting for the right time. Not a good way to get through a summer. Anyway, she was always with a girlfriend, and I was most times by myself. No way I was going to walk up to her and make a complete asshole of myself in front of her and her girlfriend. She hung around with a fat girl, probably because it made her look even better. It seemed all the good-looking girls did that. Okay, you ready? Crocker asked as we approached the front stairs to the building, which was gray and white, with lots of gingerbread like my parents' house. I was born ready. Let's go. I hated this place already. We'll go in right after these people, Crocker said, nodding in the direction of a crowd waiting to get past the door into the parlor. Pretend like you're with them. So we followed them inside. I was all sweaty, and the sharp blast of the air conditioning felt good. The old people ahead of us all stopped to write in a book that rested on what looked like a music stand. But Crocker really knew his way around here and led me right into a large, dimly lit, carpeted room with high windows, covered with heavy blue drapes. People were standing around and talking, soft organ music was playing, and there was a line of people filing past an ornate casket that was surrounded with great bushes of flowers. "Let's go see it and get the hell out of here," I said, feeling uncomfortable. I looked around, even though this room was certainly big enough. I felt as if I was being closed up in a closet. And I figured it had to be just a matter of time before someone would see we weren't supposed to be here and kick us out. "Wait till the line gets through," Crocker said. But a woman wearing a silky black dress and one of those round pillbox hats with a veil put her hand on my shoulder and asked, "Did you go to school with Matt?" I looked at her, and I've got to say I was scared, although I don't really know why I should have been. Yes, ma'am," I said, looking to Crocker, who was supposed to be the professional to pull us out of this. "I'm his Aunt Leona. You should meet his mom and dad. They're right there." She pointed to a tall, balding man and a skinny woman who made me think of some sort of bird. "Stay right here and I'll get them," Aunt Leona said. "I'm sure they'll want to talk to you." I could only nod. When the woman walked away, I said, "What the hell did you get us into?" Crocker looked nervous, too, but he said, "Didn't you read the obituary?" "Piss off, Crocker." "Well, it was a kid who used to live in Endicott. His family moved to Virginia. I can't remember the rest." "You should have told me it was a kid. Christ almighty! You should have read what I gave you," he said in a sing-song voice that made me want to crown him. "How'd he die?" I asked. "I don't know," Crocker said. "They don't tell you that kind of stuff in the paper." "Well, did he go to our school?" I asked. "I can't remember," Crocker said, "but it was too late anyway, because Aunt Leona brought a whole crowd to talk to us." I was really nervous now. What were we supposed to say to the dead kid's parents? Although it surprised the living hell right out of me, Crocker and I managed to hold our own. We said how sorry we were, and what a nice guy he was. How he played a mean stickball and was a regular nut for Bill Haley and the Comets, and Jackie Wilson. You know, Lonely Teardrops. And it was the craziest damn thing, because it was almost as if we did know this kid. With all the crying and hugging going on around us, I started to get that thunder sound in my ears, which I always used to hear before I was going to cry. I haven't heard that sound in a long time. I didn't even hear it at my dad's funeral, or at the house when everyone stood around and told me that I had to be a big boy and all that crap. It wasn't until months later that I heard the thunder sound, when I was in the house alone and practicing the piano. I looked up and saw Dad's photograph on the piano, and suddenly, like I was crazy all of a sudden, I heard the thunder, and then I started to cry. It made me feel sick, but after that, I didn't cry again. Until now. Everybody was crying, including me, and Crocker shit excused both of us so we could pay our respects to the departed. That's just what he said. As soon as we were out of their reach, he said, "Steve, you're good at this." "So are you," I said, pretending that it was all an act. "Now let's get this over with." "Okay," Crocker said, and we stood right before the casket and looked into it. I could smell the flowers, the ones with the long, wormy things inside them, but they didn't smell bad. The kid in the casket was wearing a suit and a tie, just like us. He looked like Pug Flanders, who lived down the block from me. The corpse had black hair, which was greased back. He had probably worn it in a DA with an elephant's trunk in the front, but whoever did him up probably thought a flat top was the height of coolness. It looked like he had pimples, too, but his face was coated with makeup, and it looked too white, like someone had gone crazy with the powder or something. The expression on his face was kind of snarly. I guess they couldn't wipe it off. I had a strong feeling that I would have liked this guy. But looking down at this corpse made me feel sort of weird. Not that I was scared anymore, but this kid didn't really seem to be dead. It was like this was some sort of play, and everybody was acting, just as we were. This guy just couldn't be dead. He looked like he was going to sit up any second. I blinked then because it was almost as if he was glowing like one of those religious paintings I've seen in churches. It was as if I could see the stuff of his soul, or something like that. Christ, I almost fell backward. I knew that was all bullshit, but I saw it just the same. Crocker didn't seem to see it. At least he didn't say anything. So it must have just been me. And then I remembered something about my father that scared me. It just sort of came out of nowhere. I remembered the nurse taking my arm and trying to pull me out of the hospital room. Mom was crying and screaming, and she fell right on top of Dad on the bed. But I got one last look at Dad, and he looked like he was made up of light, sort of like a halo was around him and all over him. How could I have forgotten something like that? But I did. I must have just pushed it right out of my mind. How do you think he died? I asked Crocker. Hearing my own voice made me feel normal again, and that was important right now. Who knows? Probably some sort of accident. Nah, he looks too good. That don't mean nothing, Crocker said. They can make anybody look good as new. Almost. He could have even had cancer. Crocker looked up in the air. I called his name, but he ignored me. It was as if he was listening to something. He had his head cocked, like the RCA dog. Crocker, come on, I said after a while. I was starting to get worried. Hey, you, crock of shit. Shut up, Crocker snapped. Can't you hear him? Hear what? Just listen. I listened, I really did, but I couldn't hear a damn thing. Crocker is probably off his nut, plain and simple, but I wasn't much better, not after I had just seen the corpse glowing like the hands on a watch. Who knows, maybe the dead guy could talk, and maybe Crocker could hear him, but I just wanted to get out of here. I was already feeling like the walls and everything were going to close in on me. He's leaving, Crocker said. He's saying goodbye to everybody. Cool! Okay then, let's go, I said. But I couldn't help but look at the spot where Crocker seemed to be staring, and I got the strangest feeling. Then I saw it, a pool of light like a cloud that seemed to be connected to the body that was now glowing softly again. And the light was bleeding out of the corpse, like it was the guy's spirit or something. A few seconds later the light just blinked out, as if someone had thrown a switch, and the body looked different too, as if something vital had just drained out of it. Now it was nothing more than a shell. It looked like it was made of plastic. It was dull, lifeless. We left then. Crocker and I just left at the same time, as if we both knew something. And I heard thunder, and remembered my father talking in the language only he could understand. And I felt as if I was drowning in something as deep and as big as the ocean. When we got out of the funeral home and past all the men standing around and smoking cigarettes, Crocker said, You heard him, didn't you? I could tell. I didn't hear nothing, I said, protecting my ass. Bullshit, Crocker said. Bullshit on you, I said. Well, you were acting different, Crocker said. I admitted that maybe I saw something that was a little weird, but it was probably just in my head. That bent Crocker all out of shape. He seemed happier than a kid with a box of jujubes, and I got worried that he'd shoot off his mouth to everyone he saw. I warned him about that. Give me a break, he said. It's enough that the guys in the club think of me as some sort of asshole as it is. You're the only one I feel I can talk to. I don't even really know you. Okay, I said, worried that maybe there was something wrong with me. Why else would Crocker feel that way? It also worried me that first I saw the dead guy glowing like my aunt's Sylvania Halo Light TV, and then I saw his soul, or whatever it was, pass right out of him, leaving nothing but a body that was more like a statue, or something made out of plaster of Paris. But I put those thoughts away and asked, What did the guy say? His name is Matt, remember? He said he was scared out of his gourd until he found his grandmother. What? His grandmother's dead. She'll show him around. Around? Around where? How the hell should I know? Crocker said. Heaven, probably. You gotta be kidding. I couldn't help but laugh. You're making that stuff up. But somehow I really wanted to believe it. I thought you said you saw something, Crocker said, hanging his head, and I believed you. I wanted to know what you saw. I said I thought I saw something. I punched him hard on the arm to make him feel better. And it wasn't nothing but a glowing like a TV tube when you turn it off. I never saw that. Now tell me, what else did Matt say? I asked. He hates Bill Haley. But we got Jackie Wilson, right? Uh-huh, I said. Well, that's what I thought I heard, Crocker said. Why'd you say cool? I asked. What do you mean? When you were looking up in the air, you said, cool. Don't you remember? Yeah. Well? And Crocker started laughing. It was like he couldn't stop. He kept leaning forward and stumbling, and then laughing even louder. I couldn't help but smile, and I kept knuckling his arm until he told me. He said he was going to visit the Big Bopper. What? That's what he said, and Richie Valens. You're so full of crap, I said, but now I couldn't stop laughing either. Then maybe dying's not so bad, I said, and we fell down right there on the sidewalk on Ackley Avenue in front of a brown, shingled house that belonged to Mrs. Campbell, my third-grade teacher. I don't know what it was, but I just couldn't stop laughing and crying. Neither could Crocker. And who knows? Maybe I really did see something flickering in the air above Matt's dead body while he was floating around in heaven somewhere meeting his grandmother. And maybe he did get to see the Big Bopper. Just like the Big Bopper probably got to see Valens and Holly, and probably Mozart and Beethoven, too. And maybe the Big Bopper also got to meet my dad. Why not? Dad would be there, standing right on line. He always liked to play the piano, all that bebop and boogie-woogie stuff. So maybe he became a musician, just like all the others. Now that would be something.
I say every house in America should have an electric chair. And every man just once in his life should sit in it, just so that he can feel the power of millions of gallons of electricity flow through his veins. I got an electric chair, that's all I need. You get an electric chair, Sheldon, you don't have to worry about the audience. You get an electric chair, you can tell them anything you want, as long as it's real. You get yourself an electric chair and it'll sit there all night long. Kind of a funny idea, sitting in an electric chair and doing a show. Well, think of the therapeutic value of an electric chair and all the money it is. Yes, sir, an electric chair in every home.
The Electric Chair, a show about horror. ElectricChairShow.com.
An electric chair. Wow.
Okay, we're here with champion mojo storyteller, Joe Lansdale. All right, hey Joe, didn't really want to waste too much of your time here by asking the same old questions, you know. So probably should just go ahead and ask you about the movies that you've done.
Okay. Well, as far as like ones I've done, let's talk about it this way: is that I wrote some early on. I wrote some teleplays for Batman the Animated Series, and I consider those, you know, they're obviously the first things I ever had filmed.
Yeah, they were pretty awesome too.
Oh, I love doing them. I mean, those are some highlights of my career. Actually, I really enjoyed them. The Batman's one of my favorite characters. He is my favorite comic book character of the hero sort, and it was it was fun to do those. And of course, my kids really loved them, so that was great too. But I like that period because I felt like those seemed something that not only the kids could enjoy, but adults could enjoy. And some of the ones after that, not so much. And I even did one in the Batman Robin Adventures, I think it was called. And I enjoyed doing it, but I felt like I had to water it down too much. But the first three that I did for Batman the Animated Series, I was really happy with those. And I worked on a Superman, too, that was about Bizarro. So I did those. And later on, of course, I did an independent Jonah Hex that was done for DC Showcase.
Wow. You know, I'd like to see that. I didn't know you did that.
Right. It's on two things that I know of. It's there's Under the Red Hood Blu-ray version that it's on, also as a little extra treat. And it's on the DC Showcase DVD.
Okay. Yeah, man. Those
series of like little short films, of which is one. And then after that, just to kind of finish up with that thought, there have been several little short films made, but then there was Bubba Hotep.
Oh, man.
I didn't do the script, but it's very faithful to the novella. And then Incident on and Off of Mountain Road, which was done for Masters of Showtime.
Right.
And Golden July starts filming at the end of next month.
Oh, wow. That's cool. I mean, how did you end up getting Bubba Hotep made?
Well, what's funny is that Don Coscarelli called me just out of the blue one day, and he was interested in the drive-in, and he asked me to come visit with me for a few days, and he did, and he stayed, and we had a real good time, and we discussed a lot of things, but we couldn't come to an agreement on the drive-in. And but later on, he read Bubba Hotep and Incident on Awful Mountain Road, so he ended up optioning both of those, and I didn't really think that he would ever make Bubba Hotep. I thought Incident was probably more likely. And as time passed, he just kept, renewing the option. And he asked me if I wanted to write a screenplay. I didn't at the money he was paying. And then he wrote a screenplay. And actually, I didn't think it could be done.
Right.
He wrote a screenplay and sent it to me, and I thought, man, this is pretty good. I think I had a few suggestions, and then he ended up, of course, getting Bruce Campbell and then Ossie Davis. And my son and I went out and watched them film for 4 or 5 days. And, it was great fun. And then later on, he actually made Incident on Off Mountain Road for Masters of Horror, which Keith and I were also on the set of that one. Keith's my son, by the way.
Right.
We went to Canada to watch that one filmed. So, he actually has, Don's the kind of guy, he gets into something, he's like a bulldog,
Right.
And we hope to work on something else in the future, and I wouldn't be surprised if we do.
Right. I mean, I'd seen
other stuff under option, just to answer your film question.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
The drive-in's been under option. The bottoms, there's Edge of Dark Water, The Pit. Those are Ridley Scott actually bought outright The Big Blow.
Oh, wow.
Film rights, and a couple of other things I can't think of right now, but there's some odds and ends.
Right. And didn't you also have Christmas with the Dead, right?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that because I've been one of the producers on it, and it's based on a short story of mine. But my son wrote the screenplay. In fact, it should be coming out in a couple of weeks on Amazon and streaming. It was a very independent, low budget film, but really it's a lot of fun, especially for the money they had. And the director, Carroll Langford, does a tremendous job. And so there's some really, really good stuff in it. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of laughable. Got humor. You laugh 1 minute, then the next minute you're going, ooh, But it's not like a zombie film as people think of it. And I always say that because the zombie fans who are looking for just zombie stuff may be disappointed, but the people who I think would like it might not watch it because it's a zombie film, and they keep missing out.
Right. Well,
it's got that. What we think of as a Lansdale thing. It's got a lot of odd things going on all at one time.
Well, that's one of the things that I love about your work. It's very out there, but it's with a wink and a smile too.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, there's this fine line between, I guess, parody and humor, and sometimes, I've done some things that were parodies. I have done them, but in general, I like them to be somewhat serious, but yet to have this element of humor in them as well. In Bubba Hotep, obviously the characters don't see it as humorous at all. To them, it's all very, very real. But for us to watch what's going on with them, we can't help but be amused. And the same way with the story. And so that's kind of a lot of the things that I've written, is that it's a combination of real life tall tale and folklore, mythology, and all of those things that I grew up on,
right,
combined with obviously the writing influences that I have, produced this kind of stew. And I believe that comic books are actually one of the biggest influences on the way I tell stories, in that comic books always blended genres. From the time I was a child, they were doing that. You might pick up Batman and he'd be time travel back in the Old West. Or you might, Superman travels back in time, so it was time travel, and yet it was superpowers, and those are maybe more extreme than what I'm writing as far as the super powered aspect of it. But the idea of blending genres, I think, started for me with comic books.
Right. Well, I guess we'll just go ahead and get into some of your favorite writers. I noticed that you've been posting some stuff about Robert E. Howard, and he's definitely one of my favorites.
Blue Ice Burroughs is my sentimental favorite writer, meaning that he was the writer that early on I already wanted to be a writer, but when I read him, I knew I had to be. And then a little later on, I discovered Howard. probably, I had seen Pigeons from Hell on a TV series called Thriller when I was a child.
Right.
And I didn't know it was Robert E. Howard, but at that time, and if you see it now, you might say, oh, I don't quite understand this. But at that time, it was the most powerful, violent horror thing that had ever been on TV.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand.
And these days, you look at it and go, I don't get that. But at that time, it was really, terrifying. And I never forgot that story. And then some years later, I came across a thing called Wolf's Head, which was a collection, and I have a Lancer. I think I read it in 1970, because I think I was about 18 and in college. Actually, I know I did. I can remember the exact place I read it, the house I was in, where I was sitting, everything. And I read that, the story didn't stay with me so much, but the introduction where he talked about, and I don't know if the introduction, I don't remember if it was written by him or if it was just something quoted by him, but what I do remember is him saying that it was work of his own choosing. He didn't have some son of a bitch standing over him telling him what to do, or to that effect. And that struck me because I knew that by my nature, though I worked a lot of jobs before I became a writer, I knew that I needed to be independent. My father owned his own garage. My mother worked for herself. Most of the time when I was growing up, for the largest part of their life that, when I was an adult, they worked for themselves. And I think that was appealing to me. And gradually, that's of course where I went. I already wanted to be a writer, but Burroughs made me want to be, and then Howard made me realize that I had to be. And there was just nothing left. I had to do it. And so Howard and Burroughs influenced me in that way. But later on, probably not long after that, the influences began to change. And of course, I'd grown up on Richard Matheson and Charles Beaumont,
right,
and Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury became a bigger influence. Writers like Flannery O'Connor, Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, to some extent Faulkner. All of these writers that I was reading in the literature classes that I took in the university led me to go to the library and just read everything I could get my hands on by them. And in the meantime, I was still reading genre fiction. There are people like Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett and James Cain, that whole branch of writers. So my influences are multiple, and in some ways that, they affect, one might be more strongly effective in dialogue to me, or style, or character. So it's a combination of things. I go back, Jack London, Mark Twain, also big influence.
Yeah, they're great writers, and most of your best writers have multiple influences.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that the writers that always intrigued me were the writers who could do more than one thing. Yeah,
definitely. And that's something that you definitely do. You can't really pigeonhole you.
Well, thank you.
And what strikes me, being friends with some of the other writers, they're so in depth in doing one genre or wanting to work with just one publishing house. I can't imagine being pigeonholed like that. Can you?
No, I can. I'm not saying that it's the wrong thing for other people, but I think, too, that writing is a funny thing because people get into it for different reasons. They may all start out just because they like stories, but a lot of people really want to be famous, or they want to be rich,
True,
or they want to be acknowledged for one genre, and there's nothing wrong with any of that. That's your approach. You go for it. But I went into it because I loved writing and I loved reading, and I wanted a career in it, but I didn't want a career at the expense of doing the thing that led me to it in the first place. And I think it's one reason I have retained the joy of reading and writing. And a lot of the writers I know don't quite have that as they've gotten older. And not all by any means, but some that I'm always a little shocked to find that they don't read much anymore.
Yeah.
Or, they only read nonfiction. And of course, I read a tremendous amount of that as well. But it's the joy of writing shouldn't be usurped by the success of writing. You have to make a living. I'm a realist, and I come from a poor family, and I come from a real strong work ethic. So I've always done what I had to do to take care of my family. And if I had to write something that I didn't want to write, but if I could do it well enough and get paid for it, my family needed it, I would do it.
Right.
But I've generally found that most of the time I do better if I just do what I want to do. and put it out there, because even though that's more scattered, the stuff just keeps selling. I just keep selling here and overseas. It gets auctioned for films. The comic books have been made of it. So my career has actually been very successful, pretty much 98% doing exactly what I want to do.
That's really good too, and that's, in my opinion, that's kind of the way to go. I mean, that's what I would want to do.
Yeah. You know, I don't believe you ever put art above your family or your,
right.
You know, the responsibilities that you have. But what I do find is that if you do what you really do best, that you can kind of have both.
Yeah, that's true.
And I pretty much had both. And when I say 98%, it's because I don't believe anybody does it absolutely what they want to do all the time. I mean, I wrote some MIA hunters. I wrote some pen name stuff that I really didn't want to do and didn't enjoy doing, but I put my nose to the grindstone and tried to find what could be in it that I would like or what I could bring to it that was mine. And I did that to buy a car, to stay in the business, and whatever. But if that was my entire career, I would just as soon, get a degree and teach.
Right, man. You just answered like 3 or 4 of my questions right with that.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine, because I'd rather get it to where it's a conversation instead of an interview. You know. And so, I mean, well, who are some of the writers that you really like now that's putting stuff out?
Well, some of the writers I really like now are actually writers that have been around a long time. And like William Golden is one of my favorite writers, though he hasn't written a novel in a long time.
Right.
He wrote a lot of screenplays, of course, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Yeah,
he's written a lot of suspense novels, like The Marathon Man, which I think is one of the most unique suspense novels ever written, because it manages to be a thriller and yet be about something.
Right.
And it has very real characters, a tremendous number of surprises, magic, which I think is a very predictable plot, but an extraordinarily written book. And I love the way he presented the characters and the way he presented the story. So William Goldman, who is still writing, but mostly nonfiction articles these days, and maybe screenplays still, is still alive, and therefore he's still a writer who influences me. Pete Hamel is also somebody that writes very rarely in the novel and does some nonfiction. He's another writer who influenced me a lot, and who I still look forward to new material by. Norman Partridge, he doesn't write nearly enough, but Norman Partridge is one of those writers that works primarily in the horror field, if not exclusively, who I really like his work. Stephen Graham Jones is somebody I'm real hot on right now.
Yeah.
And Stephen is one of those guys that just writes what he wants. And he teaches at a university in Colorado, and he's from Texas, but he writes some tremendously varied and interesting novels. And it's Stephen Graham Jones, not Stephen Jones, to be confused with the anthologist. He's just terrific.
Man, some pretty good anthologies. I don't even connect the two with William Goldman.
That's what I'm saying. Don't confuse them.
Well, I don't connect the two with William Goldman, that he wrote Magic and Butch Cassidy and The Princess Bride.
Yeah, he wrote the novels Marathon Man, Magic, and wrote the screenplays for both of them. I know he wrote Marathon Man, and I'm pretty sure he did Magic as well. He also did a great novel called Control. And but the Stephen Graham Jones I was talking about there's a Stephen Jones who's an anthologist and a Stephen Graham Jones who's a novelist.
Right.
And the novelist is just unique as hell. He just does really, he might write about zombies one time and then write a realistic novel about growing up in, West Texas or something. He's an extraordinary writer. And Goldman, he also wrote No Way to Treat a Lady, which was originally done under Harry Longbaugh, which of course was the real name of the Sundance Kid.
Huh.
And No Way to Treat a Lady was made to a film with Rod Steiger, which was very good. The book's really extraordinarily clever. He also wrote more mainstream literary type novels too. Boys and Girls Together is one of them. Better known as Temple of Gold. All those were tremendous too.
Wow, man. I mean, I've seen No Way to Treat a Lady.
Flannery O'Connor, also another favorite of mine.
Oh, right. Yeah, Flannery O'Connor's really good. I haven't read as much, but of
He's
that.
He's my favorite short story writer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird is probably my favorite novel, period.
Oh, that's a great book.
Yeah, Huckleberry Finn, Lonesome Dove by McMurtry, Little Big Man by Thomas Berger. Those are all favorite books of mine.
Right.
The True Grit by Charles Fortis.
Yeah, I've never read True Grit. Which version of the movie did you prefer, though?
I would prefer the second one.
Really?
Yeah, I much prefer the Jeff Bridges one. I thought it was much, much better. When I saw the John Wayne one, it seemed really good back then, but when this new one came out, it just blew it in the trees. And then I went and rented them and watched them back to back again. And the old one is it's just John, as much as I like John Wayne movies, it's just John Wayne with an eye patch. And when you see Jeff Bridges play it, he's the character in the book. Right.
But you have to admit, though, when John Wayne did The Searchers, that was kind of outside of his persona.
I think The Searchers is one of the best Western films ever made. It'd certainly be in my top 10 of Western films.
Right, yeah.
And I think it's John Wayne, maybe his best film.
I think it might be either that or Stagecoach, but I don't know. Something about The Searchers.
Very good. And Red River is very, very good.
Yeah. So I mean,
matter of taste, I guess.
So who are some of the favorite filmmakers?
Well, while we're on authors, I want to mention some people that people don't think about. Neil Barrett Jr., Louis Shiner, Get Williamson. They're all people and then of course Andrew Vachss.
Yeah. Oh, definitely him, and most definitely Neil. Neil is just wonderful.
Barrett's great, and Andrew Vachss is great, and Chet Williamson is great, and Louis Shiner is just tremendous too. His best novel for me is Black and White, but he's only available through Subterranean Press right now, and you can order the books or you can get them on ebooks. But he's really fine.
Wow! And speaking of Chet, I've had him on the Dark Dreams. He read a story for me. I had Chet on there, and really, really nice of him to do his own narration.
Look, he's narrated some of my stuff, and he did The Magic Wagon, and he's also within the film Christmas with the Dead.
Is he?
Yes.
Wow.
He has a very important role in it.
I'm going to have to check this out. Do you think it could be?
It'll be available, I want to say in a couple of weeks, but I don't want to lie to you because it might actually extend a little longer than that. But I know that next week there's the final push to get it ready, and that Amazon and streaming will have it. And so that's our next step. It was a small film, so we didn't feel like that distribution was actually going to help us as much as doing it this way.
True.
And but yeah, he's terrific in it.
Wow. I hope you can get it to Netflix soon.
Well, we talked about that. There's some of that stuff, it sounds good, but the pay isn't as good as one would think.
And I see.
I think also that we want to get through Amazon and streaming, and then we may do iTunes and some other things. We're kind of doing this ourselves, me and the director, so we're going to see where it goes.
Oh, okay. Wow, man, that's cool. Well, how about we talk about the Batman mythology a little bit, if that's okay?
All right.
I mean, unless, I know you already covered that, but...
No. You want to talk about the Batman in general, or what?
Yeah, I mean...
Well, I told you comics were a big influence on me, and they certainly were. But Batman was probably... of the superheroes, I always liked him the best because he was more realistic. I could believe on some level I could be him, although obviously I couldn't. But, you think you can because here's a guy who does everything through his mental and physical abilities. And I was always interested in that contrast. And also I had a little suit my mother made me, and I always said that the little cardboard ears started to droop, and I looked a little bit like a constipated German shepherd after a little while, sort of like a bat. But I played in that little suit, and ran around. And so Batman was always a big impact on me. And I think it's because he was a combination of heroics and shadows and mystery and horror. And when I was growing up in the 1950s, science fiction was a big influence on the Batman comics because coming out of World War II, we went into the 50s, science, because of the atomic bomb, was really prominent. Now it seems like to me a lot of people, are science deniers. But at that time, people were so influenced by what had happened that with the atomic bomb, and then Sputnik and all of the interest in the space race, that science was very much a part of what you read in comics. prior to that, the comics, people tended to get their powers through magic. But by the time you got to the the late 50s and early 60s, like with Julie Schwartz over at DC, the Flash, characters like that tended to get their powers through, scientific experiments, accidents, radiation. It was no more scientific than the magic, but at least the trend and the idea was that it was science, not magical powers that gave these people their abilities.
Right. Well, how do you feel about the new brand of movies?
Well, what would you mean by new brand of movies?
Well, like Chris Nolan's trilogy.
I love them, especially the first one.
I did too.
The first one appealed to me far more than the others. The others were a little overly busy for me, but I thought that the first one was just tremendous, and I believe that that's probably the best presentation of Batman in film ever. So I actually feel that Batman the Animated Series is the best Batman ever.
Right. Well, I mean, definitely had more story than the Tim Burton movies.
Yeah, and the Tim Burton movie, when you look at it now, and I really enjoyed the first one a lot, and sort of like the second one, but when you look at them now, you can see that they're far more parody. They're they're much broader, like the comics in some ways were in the 50s and the 60s. But the new ones are more like, the late 80s, the 90s, and they have that more realistic, gritty feel to them. And I prefer that.
Right. Well, how do you feel about the Frank Miller version of Batman?
Dark Knight Returns?
Yes.
I loved it.
I
loved it.
Very good. But
yeah, that's my favorite comic book, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I liked it best. I haven't always liked all of Miller's work, but that one comic I thought was really fascinating and interesting, and I enjoyed it. It was kind of like an alternate version of Batman, an alternate universe version, but I greatly enjoyed it, and it's probably my favorite of all the comics.
Wow. I mean, do you feel that the late 80s, with Alan Moore and Frank Miller, kind of took the innocence from comics, or did they take them in a better direction?
I think that you can carry anything too far, because I think somewhere in there it became every superhero had a problem, and they were really messed up, and I think after a little while that becomes as cliche as the other. But I think that when they did that, it was magnificent, and it made for an interesting, approach to the characters. And I think that it was time, because what happened is that all of us who grew up reading those could no longer embrace the comics of our youth or our teen years as we did then. So the comics had to grow up with us, and they realized that their readership, used to, when you got about 14 or 15, that was the end of the comic book readership. But then they started expanding it. I think the mistake they made, though, is that they did that so much that they lost the entry level for new readers, but they retained older readers. And I think it's one reason comics begin to fail, along with a lot of other things that added to it. But I think for a long time, and they tried to correct that later on, and I think maybe they did. But a lot of the people who came along later that were fans came along because of Batman the Animated Series and Justice League.
Right.
TV animated. And animation has changed too. And films and animation have sort of taken over a lot of what comics, the appeal that comics had. They're different mediums, and there's things that you get with comics that you don't get with the other two. But used to, if you went to see a Superman movie, you could go to the comics and see things in the comics that they couldn't do in the movies. Now they can do almost anything in the movies that the comics could do, and have motion as well.
That's true. You're absolutely right.
And that's one thing, I think, another reason there was a decline in, not the characters are interested in the comic book characters, but interested in the comic books themselves, because now you can see that in the movies. So a lot of what comics gave you that you could not have, you now can have.
Wow. Yeah. Well, let me ask you, did you read the book that Alan Moore was influenced by to do The Watchmen?
Which one was he influenced by?
For some reason, the name of it escapes me.
Justice Society or something like that?
Yeah, it was a book that I think was published in the mid-'70s, where it took realistic superheroes. You know what I'm talking about?
I don't know. If I knew the title of it, I'd know if I read it, but I can't think of which one you're
right. Well, maybe, I'll send it to you on Facebook, a link.
The Alan Moore thing, you can see the influence of many different comics, though. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And I think that was kind of the point. And in some ways, with Frank Miller's Dark Knight, if you go back to the old 40s Batman, he carried a gun and drove a red roadster. And those were extremely dark. He was a killer. He would kill.
Yeah.
And then it was in the 50s when they when the comics code came, that they made a more vanilla Batman and a lot more science fiction. And then in the 60s, it began to kind of lean a little bit in the detective comics and the rise of detective comics. And by the 70s, he was, leaning more and more back to his original sources, but without the killing. It's sort of a combination between the two.
Wow.
I think that's just a natural extension that Miller had.
Right. And the Joker, the character of the Joker originally was a serial killer, wasn't he?
He was. I don't remember if he was a serial killer or not, but he's definitely a killer. The origin of the Joker changed somewhat. There was the Red Hood who fell in the vat, who became the Joker in some stories, and then there was another that he was the one that killed Batman's parents. That was added into the mythology later. That the Joker, space was made that way, and he blamed something dealing with Batman, and he blamed Batman. All of these origins have changed and, been reevaluated over the years by different writers. So it's difficult to say which version, you're speaking of. And if
right.
It's a serial killer one, I don't really remember that. It's only a murderer. Obviously, if you look at the Joker or any of them, they're serial killers because they keep killing people. Or mass murderers or something.
Right.
Most of the time in the old comics, though, the Joker didn't so much kill people as that he aggravated the hell out of people. It was about giant props and weird crimes that they were trying to figure out before he did them, weird robberies and things like that. It was a different tone. So, the comics have gone through a lot of different periods, the Golden Age, the Silver Age, and I think they're calling some of it now the Bronze Age and whatever.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you before we end this. The story Fish Night, I just listened to it on Tales to Terrify.
Uh-huh.
How did you come up with that story? That is just very out there.
That's all. The weird thing is that I was watching. I want to say I was watching Star Trek. It was something because I didn't just watch anything. I was something that I was really interested in watching. But whatever I was watching, there became a commercial on about dentures or something, and I watched that commercial. And there was another commercial that had some fish in a pond or something. So one of them led to a story called Chompers, and the other one led to a story called Fish Night, and they were right within. I don't know if they were the same day, but I remember them as if they were together, and I never can separate those two. But even when I saw the fish and the dental commercial, which led to Chompers, the idea of the teeth and the fish also led to those big nasty fish, the idea of prehistoric fish, and I just. I went to took a nap, and when I woke up, the story was there. And I'm sure all of the things I've read about, how the desert used to be a sea bottom, et cetera, just put it together.
Wow. Yeah, it's an amazing story, as almost all of yours are,
Well, thank you. It has a lot to do, I think, with you can have some catalyst, and you can tell somebody I wrote it because of that, and that may be correct. That's the thing that finally kicked you into gear. But a lot of times the stories are probably forming, over and over. And I had, when I was, like I said, I took a nap, but I would have these popcorn dreams. If I ate popcorn while I was watching TV or a movie or something like that, it would sometimes give me a kind of a weird stomach problem, and it would cause me to have weird dreams. Which is one reason I seldom ever eat it anymore. But it made me sick. But it gave me all of these short stories and things that I wrote during the early 80s.
Yeah.
About the mid-80s. A lot of those were popcorn dreams. And a lot of what I write now are dreams. They're not popcorn dreams. The popcorn dreams were crazy. But almost everything that has been really mattered to me has somehow either been a popcorn dream or a serial dream that I just can't shake. and then when I'm writing a story, usually I go to bed at night, and when I get up the next morning, it's there. And I'm assuming I must have dreamed it or filled it in or what, because when I get up and I go down, it's generally just a matter of sitting down at the machine and writing.
Right. Well, I did want to also ask about your postings on Facebook. If they're not entertaining, they're very good advice.
Thank you.
And I have read where, you wrote something on there, you sort of agitated somebody and they want to write back and stuff, but, I don't think anybody's got balls enough to take you on, Joe.
Well, the thing about it is that I don't mind people disagreeing with me. That's fine. I mean, I do that for that reason, and sometimes I'll go, yeah, you're right. That makes sense. But what I hate is when you say, look, this is just my opinion, and somebody go, well, that's not the way it's done. Well, I'm thinking, okay, I agree with you. For you, that's not the way it's done, but I'm not trying to tell people that this is the ultimate advice or that it's supposed to be all things for all people. But, I mean, I don't want to spend my time going over that. I mean, if you don't like the advice, pass on it or go say, hey, here's what works for me. That's fine. I always let those run because if my advice doesn't help somebody else's advice. But just some of the petty stuff, I'm just not. I've got to where I just lose absolute patience for it. I used to try to be polite about it. Then I got a little less polite. Now I just start deleting stuff that has nothing to do with the subject. People just decide they want to have some axe to grind, or tie some political thing into everything you say. And if I want to talk politics on there and that invites other people in, that's fine, as long as it's the same discussion, or the same thing about writing, or the same thing about anything, Robert E. Howard or Burroughs or Henry O'Connor or whatever it is. I'm all for it and enjoy it back and forth. And I'm thinking other people looking at this may say, well, I don't agree with Lansdale. I think this other guy's got a good point. That's fine. As long as we're having sane conversations and not just splitting hairs,
Yeah, it's really not the place for that. I mean, if they were talking to you face to face.
Too, it's not like a regular Facebook page. It's not there for invitation for people to just come in and sell their wares. People say, well, you're selling your stuff. I go, well, yeah, you're right. This is my page.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I can choose to help you or not. And a lot of times when people will come to me about charities, I don't post the charities unless I know them. Because a lot of times people have charities that they use to just get money.
Yeah.
And I'm just not, I guess I'm cynical to some extent, and I have to know more about those charities, and I have to know that I'm not asking people who come to my site to give money to something that I wouldn't support, or that if I did support, I need to know what that money's being used for and where it's going. So I always try to mention Protect, because I know Protect's a great organization because Andrew Vax put it together.
Right.
And there are a few others, animal charities and things like that I try to support. And when people write me and say, I've got this new novel out, will you post it? A lot of times I won't. And it's just not because I'm not necessarily disinterested in that person, but because if I post that one, then I get, 1,000.
Right.
And so what I would do is I would just turn my whole site into a billboard for other people. And it's supposed to be a billboard for me, the people that interest me. And I certainly do my best to support writers that I like and admire. Some of them new, some of them not. But I have to know something about the work. I have to have read it, or every once in a while I might just find a post intriguing enough to say, this looks interesting. I can't vouch for it, but you might want to check it out. It looks kind of intriguing.
Right. Yeah, people should realize, that's for you to get your stuff out and to connect with your fans.
Yeah, that's my plan. I'm there to market my stuff. I don't make any bones about it. But I'm also always aware of it. I'm trying to say I don't expect to be, universally admired, and I don't necessarily think that my work's going to fit everybody else's work, and, I can live with that.
Yeah.
And, bad reviews, I can live with that. I prefer good ones, who doesn't? But, there's a lot of things like that you just say, this is my side, I'm here to promote my work. It's the only reason I do it. I enjoy interacting with people, but I actually don't like Facebook or Twitter because it takes time out of my day. Once I sit down and I get a good conversation going with another person, I always enjoy it.
Right.
I'd really rather not do it. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to promote my stuff.
Yeah. Well, I want to personally thank you. You've been a really good friend to the podcast, and
I'm glad to do it.
And have always been open to, and always answered my messages as well.
Well, there's one thing is that I've never forgot where I started from. I've never forgot that everybody starts somewhere, including me. I never forgot all all of the rejections. I've never forgot being treated like a second-class writer, probably because I deserved to be until I'd had more time. But nonetheless, I've never forgotten those things. That, the small press, a lot of people say, well, that's how I built my name, but that isn't true. I actually started selling to the professional press first, and I sold nonfiction, and I sold fiction to the professional press. I started selling to the small press kind of as a sideline. But that said, I've always loved their dedication, and I've always felt that the small press is an avenue for stories and books that might otherwise not be published because the mainstream publisher can't make any money off of it.
Yeah.
The small press can. They can take chances on more oddball things, more unique things. So I do everything within my power to support them. And also, I'm making a living as a writer, both with the mainstream and the small press. So it's not all just altruism, of course. But I do believe you got to remember your roots. That said, you have small press people come and say, well, I know you started out in small press, and yet you won't do this story for me. And I said, well, yeah, I can't afford to write a story for you for nothing.
Right.
Except somewhere else. So once in a while, I do that. If I have time, space, have a story in mind, and the anthology or whatever it is, the magazine fits my pistol that day, I just might do it. But I do believe that you got to remember those things, and then yet you've got to be a professional as well if you're going to make a living and you're going to continue in the business. I've been here 40 years. There's a lot of people who are better than me that were gone 5 years after they started, if they lasted that long.
Wow.
It's a tough business to stick into. And even some of my favorite writers don't work full-time as a writer. They have other jobs. And so to survive in this business, you have. I think what really helps is that you can either be a conniving son of a bitch, I guess, but the best thing is to be a good and honest person, and the best work you can do. That's it. And to stay consistent and to just realize that it's not one book doesn't necessarily going to make you, famous and rich, but that a body of work is what matters.
That's true. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for stopping by and doing the interview.
You're welcome.